Hello everyone, I hope that you're well. In today's video, I'm going to be doing my very first book haul on this channel, and it's quite a big one. So there's going to be 18 books in this book haul. They come from various locations. Some come from an op shop being what we call a thrift store or a charity shop here in Australia. Some come from Book Depository and others come from a remainder bookstore called The Book Grocer. And there's quite a few of them in my city, so I am often there kind of hunting for some books at really good prices. So I guess I'll start with the op shop books. The first book I have is Homage to Catalonia by George Orwell. This is a memoir of sorts about George Orwell's time fighting for the Republican side of the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s. What's interesting about this book is that allegedly George Orwell was chased out of Spain by the partisans that he fought for, which I think is really intriguing. So I'm hoping that this book will shed some light on that. I think it will. And yeah, I'm really excited to read this one. The next book I have is Lost Japan, Last Glimpse of Beautiful Japan by Alex Kerr. This book seems to me to be about how traditional Japanese culture is waning in modern Japan, and Alex Kerr seems to be lamenting that. Should be interesting, but I don't really know if I like this premise, Last Glimpse of Beautiful Japan, because what is there to say that modern Japan isn't beautiful as well? I don't know. So I'm interested to read this. This could be a bit contentious. The next book I have is The Iliad by Homer. I don't think this needs much of an introduction. I think a lot of you have either read this or know what it's about. I have never read Homer. I've never actually read any classical Greek literature. So I thought it's time. I need to read this, especially because I found it at such a good price. So I'm excited to read this one. And I love the way it kind of just flops open. Not a lot of Penguin Classics do that, so hopefully this is a new kind of approach they're taking to their bindings, but anyway, I'm excited for this one. Next, we have another Penguin Classic, and it is Paradise Lost by John Milton. This is an epic poem about the story of Genesis, but instead of the devil being some pernicious, ominous being, John Milton actually gives the devil a lot of charisma, and it's quite a controversial text because of that. John Milton set out with Paradise Lost to justify the acts of God to men, but I think a lot of people have instead taken away that God is just really, really cruel. So I'm interested to see how I interpret Paradise Lost, especially because I was raised in a Christian family. So this should be an interesting read. And lastly, we have Room by Emma Donoghue, which is a book that I've been hearing about for many, many years and only decided to pick it up in the last month. Room is a room. I think it says is 11 feet by 11 feet. All it possesses is a skylight and a locked door, and there's a TV. And Jack lives his life almost through this TV. That is until his mother reveals to him that there is indeed an outside world. That's all I know about this book. It's really intriguing, so I'm incredibly excited to get to this one. I am tempted to read this one next month, but there's a lot that I want to read next month, so it's unlikely that I will get to this, but definitely within the next few months, I really want to read this. So that's the end of the books from the op shop. Now for the books from Book Depository. So I have 4 from Book Depository. The first is Deaf Republic by Ilya Kaminsky. I've already read this book. I read it at the beginning of November, and I absolutely loved it. This is probably my favorite poetry collection of the year. I will talk more about this in my wrap-up at the end of the month, but this was incredibly powerful. It was heart-wrenching. It was beautiful. Oh, I loved it so much. So I really recommend this one, but of course I will have a full review of it in my wrap-up. The next book I have is another narrative poem, and that is The Long Take by Robin Robertson. This book came onto my radar last year when it was nominated. I think it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. Yes, it says it right there. And it won the Goldsmiths Prize. At the time, I wasn't interested in war poetry at all. I really didn't care for it. But after reading a collection of war poetry this year, I have found that I'm quite interested in reading more of it. So I thought this would be a great place to start, moving forward. This is about a D-Day veteran who decides that he can't return to his home of Nova Scotia and instead decides to move to America in search of freedom. So he moves to San Francisco, to Los Angeles, to New York, and as he moves from city to city, he bears witness to various events that are happening in America. This is a really interesting idea for a narrative poem, so I'm really excited to see how it plays out. I will be reading this next month, so I will have my thoughts on this relatively soon. Next is a book that I've already read. I got it from the library, but I loved the book, so I decided to get a physical copy for my own library, and that is Lost Children Archive by Valeria Luiselli. So this book is difficult to pin down because there's many layers to the story, but in short, it's about a road trip involving a family. The parents are both sound engineers / archivists. The father wants to go to Arizona to find the homeland, the region where the Apache tribe lived, and record soundscapes of that region. The wife, on the other hand, wants to go to detention centers where children who have escaped from Mexico into the USA are being held, and to make recordings of these children. Sound recordings. That's basically what it's about, but there's a lot more to it. Yeah, I just had to have a copy of this book. I really, really enjoyed it. Lastly, we have Witchcraft. What's the subtitle? The Invention of Philosophy in English. This is by Jonathan Ray. This is a book that as soon as I saw it on Book Depository, I think it was on pre-order, I had to get it. I had to get this book because it's everything that I want from a philosophy history text. This book adopts a novel structure, which is really interesting. It's aiming to present a narrative of the history of philosophy in a really interesting way, particularly having a focus on the way that this philosophy was practiced. It is limited to philosophy in English. However, there are some mentions of translated works of philosophy. It mentions that it focuses on Emerson, Hume, even George Eliot, among many others. And I just think it's a really interesting way of engaging with philosophy, which is usually presented in a rather dry fashion. So I'm hoping this is a really engaging read, and I will probably have my thoughts on this in the next few months. I don't think I'll get to it by the end of the year, but I would love to get to it maybe in January or February. The battery is about to die, so I'm going to have to be quick with this. I've got 8 science fiction novels that I purchased from a Remainder bookstore called The Book Grocer. I think I've mentioned that already, and I've got a biography as well. So I'm going to kind of go through these quickly. The first is Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny. This is a novel about a world where there are gods walking among men, but there's this question, are they really gods? Are they just posturing? There's a lot of links to Eastern mythology and religion. It's very enigmatic, actually, but the synopsis ends with the question, how has the colonization of another planet become a reenactment of Eastern religion and mythology? Sounds wild, so I'm really excited to get to this one. The next book is Time Out of Joint by Philip K. Dick. I have a feeling this is the book that directly inspired The Truman Show. This is about a man who enters a newspaper competition every single day, and he wins every single day. And it comes to the point where he starts to think, is my life real? Is the world around me real, or is it a construction? And I guess it's just about his awakening and coming to terms with that. Next is another Philip K. Dick novel. This is Veilus, and Veilus is one of his more mystical novels. I think it comes after he had some spiritual experience, and I know that this really influenced his fiction. So this is about an alien intelligence called Vast Active Living Intelligence System, or Veilus, and it delivers a series of revelations to humanity that sort of challenges the fabric of reality. That's all I know about it, but sounds intriguing. Next we have Raft by Stephen Baxter. The background for this is that humanity has accidentally entered a universe where gravity is 1 billion times the strength of that of Earth. The book is set in this universe, but much later after that event, when humanity is split between 2 kind of functionary groups, the scientists and the miners. This is about a man who is a miner who discovers a particular piece of information that sort of sets a series of events in motion about what really happened to humans when they first arrived. I might get to this one in the next couple of months. Next, we have Greybeard by Brian Aldiss. This is a direct response to nuclear warfare. This came out in 1953, so I guess the atomic bomb of World War II was still fresh in people's minds. This is about a world wherein nuclear weapons were detonated in orbit above Earth, and consequently the entire human population has been rendered sterile. Everyone is aging, civilization is crumbling, and people are losing hope. This book is set in London, and it's about a man and his wife who travel down the Thames seeking help, and that's all I know about it. Sounds pretty cool. Next we have The Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut. This seems to be a really absurd novel. I think it's very in line with a lot of what Kurt Vonnegut does. This is about a man who is converted into pure energy, and his waveforms intercept with Earth only every 59 days, I think. And when that happens, he materializes as a man again in Rhode Island. But he can only do this for 1 hour before he converts back into a waveform. And because of this kind of cyclic transformation, retransformation, he is able to bear witness to many different events in humanity's history. And I think it's about kind of just the absurdity of existence and things like that. Very in line with Vonnegut. Next we have Philip K. Dick's Ubik or Ubik. This is about a man who dies. He is a boss of a company, and on the day of his funeral, his employees are receiving strange communications from him. And it says on the back here, the world around them, his employees, is warping and regressing in ways that suggest that their own time is running out, if it hasn't already. So, mysterious, very strange. I don't like this cover. I mean, I don't know what this has to do with that story, but anyway, I'll find out, I guess. And finally, we have Alfred Bester's The Demolished Man. This is a novel about a man who has very few qualifications. He's uneducated, he's not very intelligent, he hasn't got a lot going for him in this society. And he is an unskilled space crew laborer. While on a space mission in deep space, something happens and he survives somehow for 170 days, after which he makes his way back to Earth with the thirst of revenge. I also don't really like this cover. I mean, maybe, I don't really know. My battery is about to die, so I'm going to try to cover this one very quickly, but this is Philip Larkin, A Life by Andrew Motion. I love Philip Larkin. I've talked about him on my channel. I became really interested in him as a man, as a person, after reading his collected works. And Philip Larkin is one of those poets that treads the fine line of accessibility and profundity really, really well. In fact, better than any poet that I've read. But he's also very cynical, and he has a very bleak outlook on humanity, and I became really interested in what might have happened to him in the past that caused him to arrive at these conclusions. Hopefully this will have some answers. It's by Andrew Motion, who is a poet, and I actually read one of his collections this month called The Customs House. I'm hoping that this is going to be very well researched, well informed. I don't know if Andrew Motion knew Philip Larkin, but he certainly would have been in contact with people who did. So I've heard great things about this. I'm hoping I enjoy it. Okay, so that's all for the book haul. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully the battery doesn't die while I film this outro. If you have read any of these books, please let me know what you thought about them down below. I'm really interested to hear your opinions on them, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.